For years, we've been telling you that Canadians are looking for a better place to live. Some want to lower their ridiculously high tax bill. Others just don't like the way the country is going. And yet a lot of people don't know where to go or feel they can't afford to leave. Today, I'm going to tell you about a new report that lists one country I believe could be better than Canada in almost every measurement. And while it's good for wealthy people, it's also very affordable to get into. And the country that's perhaps better than Canada in any number of metrics is actually in South America. I'll tell you why that's a good thing in a moment. But I was looking at the new Corruptions Perceptions Index. Every year they put this index out. It talks about which countries are the most and least corrupt. And so at the top you have Denmark, Finland, New Zealand, Norway, tax-friendly Singapore, Sweden, potentially tax-friendly Switzerland. Those are the ones that top the list. And you go down to 12th place and you see Canada. Now, a lot of people who live in Canada would say, our country is far more corrupt out of almost 200 countries than number 12, but this partially does look at people's perceptions. And so the people who think that Canada is doing perfectly fine and the economy is fine and the government's great, those are the ones saying, hey, our country has no corruption. The United States, you have to go down a bit. They're in 24th place. It's going to cost multiple billions of dollars to be elected president in the United States, and political candidates hand out favors like cotton candy at the fair. How that's not corrupt, I don't know. But here's where I got the idea for this country that a lot of Canadians could say this is better in every way. Because if you go down just a couple spots below Canada on this index, you find a country in South America that actually outpaces Canada in many other metrics. And so after Canada comes Estonia, then Australia, then Hong Kong and Belgium, and then you get down in 16th place to the small South American country of Uruguay. Now, we've talked for years about how South America is an interesting plan B, plan C, or maybe even your first plan, your plan A. It could be a place where you could go. And I'm going to tell you why I think Uruguay, while it does score a few points lower than Canada in the Corruption Perceptions Index, there's actually a lot of redeeming qualities about it. Let's first talk about the cost. So I don't care if you're wealthy or I don't care if you're struggling to make ends meet in Canada. We all like a bargain. And so if you compare Toronto to Uruguay's capital of Montevideo, the cost of living is about 38% less. However, rent is about 69% less. So housing, you're saving about 2/3. Imagine that. That's one of the biggest expenses that most people have in the world. The other big thing that helps Nomad Capitalist is that Uruguay has a special tax scheme for new arrivals. It's an essentially 11-year tax scheme. If you have passive income, you basically get an exemption on tax on that income. And so you can leave Canada. This applies to people from other countries too. You could leave Canada. You could exit their tax system, take your passive income with you. And for the next effectively 11 years in Uruguay, you don't have much, if any, tax to worry about. Now, when it comes to running an active business, it gets a little bit trickier. There are more factors in play. Uruguay does have easier rules like what are called CFC rules, controlled foreign corporation rules, that make it easier to own a company and live in Uruguay. Depending on how active you are in your business and a number of other factors, you may be eligible to dramatically reduce, possibly even eliminate taxes in Uruguay for about the first decade when you move there on a business. So more planning on business taxation is required. Uruguay does have a number of places where they don't want your business to be incorporated, mostly tax havens. But with some proper structuring, you could have a relatively low tax business in Uruguay. And if you have passive income, you can pretty much eliminate that tax again for about the first decade. So right there, you've covered two things that Canadians and a lot of other folks in the Western world are concerned about: the rising cost of housing and taxation. If you took those two out and you dramatically reduced, or in one case, potentially even eliminated those costs, what else much do you have left? And so the secret of wanting to get out of Canada is you want to have some kind of income you can take with you, either a job, either a freelance income, or ideally, some kind of business. If you're one of the 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs that we work with, we can help you as our client figure out where you're going to structure your business. And the answer is probably not to structure it in Uruguay. Your answer would be leave Canada as a tax resident, tidy up your affairs there, do what's required for your specific case to exit the Canadian tax system. The sooner you do that, the better, because the more money you accumulate, the more they have to potentially apply an exit tax to on the way out. Then once you've exited the Canadian tax system, you can enter Uruguay's tax system, but that doesn't mean that your business is going to go there. And so you're starting to think as a nomad capitalist where your business is going to be in the place where it's treated best. You're going to be in the place where you're treated best. Uruguay does have good banks, and so you can open a bank account in some cases even as a non-resident. We have a few banks, one in particular that will work with non-residents, and so you might want to move your money there, but you might find an entirely separate place to move your money. Uruguay is a place that a Canadian could actually move to and live in, but your wealth, while not in Canada perhaps anymore, might be in Singapore, it might be in Switzerland, it might be in Jersey, it might be somewhere else. Your business could be incorporated somewhere else around what Uruguay's rules are for having businesses outside of the country. And then again, you could have your tax home set up in Uruguay under this exemption. Now, here's the cool thing. If you live in Uruguay for between 3 and 5 years, you can apply for citizenship. I've been saying for years, if you don't actually live there, they're probably not going to give you citizenship. But if you actually move there and integrate into the country, if you learn Spanish, if you learn the history, if you establish some ties to the country, then your chances are substantially better. And Uruguay actually has one of the strongest passports in the world. But here's the reasons why I think that Uruguay is a country that could actually outperform Canada in many ways. This is certainly not your only choice. We've helped our clients move to many tax-friendly countries. If you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, you can learn about our process. It's not just as simple as leave Canada, move to Uruguay. There's plenty of other choices. There may be a better one for you. There may be multiple better places that you want to move and you want to travel the world. But if you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, you'll learn how we help people. But the reason I think that someone who likes what Canada has to offer but is tired of the high taxes, tired of the bad weather, tired of the bad governance, not only is the weather better in Uruguay, and certainly being on the opposite side of the world, I was there in November, for example. People love to go there for New Year's Eve. I mean, that's a great time to be there. It's comfortable. If you wanted to go back to Canada, you could spend a little bit of time in Canada in the summer, and you're not really losing out. So you get to follow the sun a little bit, but you've got better weather overall. Geopolitically, Uruguay, for me, you're not in the middle, right next to the United States, and right across an ocean from Europe, which are kind of the hot spots with countries that have a lot of opinions that I think the emerging world and BRICS are pushing back on. Yes, I mean, Canada has a very strategic location, but geopolitically, it is right in the middle. And that could be good, but that could also not be so good. And a Canadian passport historically has been very well received. I don't entirely expect that to change, but I do think we're entering a time of multipolarity where you're on one side or you're on the other. And I think Uruguay is a much more neutral country. No one has a beef with the Uruguayans. They have a lot of beef there, but no one really, has a problem with people who carry that passport. And while Canada has been among Western passports one of the more neutral ones, historically, again, is that going to entirely change? No. But it is, I think Uruguay is one that is even more neutral. A lot of people don't know where it is. And once you get over the initial ego, issue of that, I think actually, having a citizenship in a place that people kind of don't entirely know where it is. If someone once said, "Oh, Montenegro, are you from Montevideo, Uruguay?" Like, people really don't know, and that could be a good thing. But it's a very strong travel passport that even has access visa-free to one or two countries that Canada doesn't. So you can expand your passport portfolio, and I think geopolitically, that's a benefit. Geographically, who knows what's happened? People talking about World War III. People want access to agriculture. People want to be far away from the chaos in the world. Well, Uruguay's pretty far down there in South America. You've got a continent that's relatively sparsely populated, so you have that you have in Canada. Canada, obviously, similar landmass to the United States, but a lot fewer people for obvious reasons. But people in Canada say, "Hey, we like our greater sense of space." Well, Uruguay's not nearly as big of a country, but you've got a very small country, and you're down in a part of the world that is one of the least populated parts of the world, which gives you room to maneuver if bad stuff happens. So geopolitically and geographically, I think you'll have a number of the benefits of Canada. Let's just talk about day-to-day life. I do not live in Uruguay. I'm not saying it's for everybody. In fact, I found it a little bit boring. The politics are boring. But if you're living in Canada and you want to take away the stuff that's frustrating you in the country, maybe boring's exactly what you're looking for, especially if you have a family. And so it is pretty peaceful. I was there not that long ago. People seem to mind their own business. You don't see as much of the craziness that you see in the Western world today. And yet it's a very developed country. You've got a lot of folks there who their ancestors were German, their ancestors were Italian. You have people who've come from all over the world because that's how the new world works. So you have kind of a similar sense of values, at least in a global sense. It's not like you're going to Asia where you're always going to be a foreigner. Uruguay is a country you could integrate into. People have come from all over the world. People still retain this idea of being European in many cases. Seems like a harmonious place to be. You've got effectively people living along the coast, and you've got a lot of open area for things like food production. And again, all at much lower prices than you'd have in Canada. So I would argue, if you're looking for something that's more laid back, it's a better quality of life day to day, just without some of the frustrations of the Western world. It's a heck of a lot less expensive, geographically and geopolitically well suited, very tax optimized for people for whom that's important. And so again, it is one of the more equal societies in South America. This is not Venezuela, not even close. Argentines, consistently go to Uruguay. It is seen as a regional neutral hub and a regional safe hub, whether it's for capital or whether it's for people living there, reducing their taxes, just being safe. It is a place that's very well respected. The passport's well respected. So how do you get in? Well, what a lot of folks do is they simply show their income. You can go down below $2,000 a month if you're single. Let's just take a family, $3,000 US a month. So mark that up for Canadian dollars, something like 4,000 Canadian dollars a month. If you're not making 4,000 Canadian dollars a month with a family in Canada, has Canada really helped you that much? I think a lot of people can find 3,000 US dollars within a family of four. And if you can show that income, then you can get a residence permit. You can move down to Uruguay. If you're willing to live there essentially the majority of the time, maybe you make short visits back to Canada, which has to be planned from a tax perspective to make sure that you're in good standing there. But you can live in Uruguay a majority of the time, and you can get this tax residence. What you can alternatively do is you can just buy a property for around $500,000, and you can get in that way, make an investment, get the tax residence. And so this is an opportunity for folks who maybe don't have as much money, and yet you have beautiful multi-million-dollar homes along some of the areas, for example, near Punta del Este. And so it's a place where you can go, there's calm, there's serenity. Listen, that's not for everybody. I like a place with a little bit more excitement, right? My home in South America is in Bogota. It's not a tax-friendly place year-round. Statistically, it's not as safe. I've never had any problems there myself, but Uruguay statistically is much safer. You'll have more ability to move around and carry your phone and just feel good with your family. And Uruguay's pretty open. People bring their pets. People bring stuff from their country. So really, no matter where you are in the spectrum, because it is a more equal country, I think it would appeal to a lot of folks who are from Canada. And because the time zones are really not that much different, that's one thing that our clients tell us is time zones matter. In that regard, it's a much easier place to move to than, let's say, Singapore, where you'd have a lot of those benefits. But because it's in South America, that's a part of the world where if you have income, they're willing to take you in. And if you're willing to stay there, spend your time there, and learn the language, you can get a second citizenship that you're not going to get in Asia, and you can get it pretty quickly. So once you have that, now you can decide, what do you want to do? Am I going to be Canadian, Uruguayan? Or at some point, is Canada going to go so far off the deep end that I'm not going to want to be Canadian? Whether it's because they're doing something nasty to their citizens overseas, they impose a bunch of new regulations, they want to tax me no matter where I live, the way the U.S. does now. There may come a time when you'd be happy to be Uruguayan. And yes, you'd lose visa-free travel to a couple of countries, including Canada. if you were to give up Canadian citizenship. But I think that's a decision that for most Canadians would be a long way down the road. You see people like Jagmeet Singh who have insinuated they would like to do more taxation of people like expats. But I'm not sure that's happening tomorrow. But it's something to be prepared for. And that's the benefit of being a Canadian is unlike American, you may be more willing to wait up to 5 years to get a citizenship. You may be more willing to go there and learn the language. So there's many countries you can move to. We help our clients move to many different places, whether it's in Central and South America. Europe has tax-friendly countries, both Western and Eastern. Southeast Asia has tax-friendly countries. But not everybody likes the sense of adventure that I personally have in my life where I'm moving around all the time. And I think Uruguay ticks the boxes on low corruption, great weather, geopolitically, geographically stable, less expensive, but also good taxes in a society that is not extremely unequal, in a society where people seem to get along, and where you have the civil liberties. They were one of the first countries to jump on with a number of different civil liberties in the early and mid-2000s. And so if you're a Canadian and you value those civil liberties, yeah, you're not going to have them everywhere. If you go to a tax-free country in the Caribbean, you're not going to have gay marriage, for example. Uruguay is more open in that regard without having some of the stuff that people in the West today find beyond the pale. That's one of many countries. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn how we can help you go through that process if you are an affluent Canadian, or if you're from somewhere else in the world and you're tired of where you're living. One thing that we do put on every year is a live event called Nomad Capitalist Live. And it's sold out for this year. We have a waiting list, but we bring together about 750 guests from around the world who either want to live this lifestyle or are living this lifestyle. So if you're not ready to work with someone to create your entire holistic plan yet, go to nomadcapitalist.com/live, get on the waiting list for our live event. If you can't get in this year, you'll be the first to know next year. We bring together great speakers and experts on these topics. If you're trying to figure out where to go, you've got two avenues. Work with Nomad Capitalist, come to Nomad Capitalist Live. You're going to learn a lot. But I think that Canadians have a great option in Uruguay, among many others, if they're tired of what's happening in their country.